Welcome to Resume Storyteller with Virginia Franco, bringing you interviews with industry experts and regular folks who tested the job search waters and succeeded, and strategies to tell your story and land you job interviews in 60 days, guaranteed. Here's your host, Virginia Franco.
Hey guys, I am so excited to introduce to you Heathe Mills. She is an attorney and a negotiations expert for women, and she has helped hundreds of women successfully negotiate meaningful promotions, pay raises, and breakthroughs in their careers. She's the founder of Women Who Ask, a company that provides consulting and programs to help women negotiate for what they want, earn more money, communicate with more confidence, and upgrade their quality of life on every level. Heathe, thank you so much. Welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Tell me, you've heard the quick bio that I read to our audience, but I'd love for you to provide an overview of how you help people.
Sure. Yeah. So I typically help corporate women when they are wanting to negotiate a pay raise or a promotion in their current role, or help them through the process of negotiating a compensation package with a new company. Giving them the foundational negotiation skills, but then also helping them through a particular negotiation.
So whether they're getting whether they're job searching or looking for a promotion, you work at both ends of that.
Exactly.
And how did you come to this role? How did you find this niche?
Yeah. Well, I was a class action lawyer on plaintiff side for about 10 years. And, you probably know that class action litigation, you don't typically go to trial. It's really all about negotiating settlements. So I became really interested in what the top negotiators do. And I worked in a firm that had a lot of women. So I wanted to learn from them. And I had the opportunity to really learn how to negotiate complex settlement agreements from some incredible women. And what I also noticed during this process is that women who are incredibly amazing at negotiating for others, their clients, or on behalf of companies, aren't always as good at negotiating for themselves. And so
true.
And so eventually I left the law. I went into coaching and started doing executive coaching. And then I later recognized that all the women that I worked with really wanted and needed negotiation help. And, it's not something that we learn. And so I went and did some more training on negotiation and mediation. And that got me to where I am now.
Wow. And you're so true. I feel like women can be the strongest advocates, but, turning it around on themselves is not one of our strengths, certainly not one of mine.
It's hard for most women, including myself. I would put myself in that category too.
That's interesting. So, I have read a lot on this topic, and I've seen that sort of over and over again, women we settle for less when it comes to business. And I'd be curious to hear from you. What are the areas where you see the biggest gaps?
Well, coming back to the point we were just talking about, the research shows that there aren't gaps when women are negotiating on behalf of others. That women actually do negotiate just as well as men when they're negotiating on behalf of a company or on behalf of their clients. But there is a gap when they're negotiating for themselves. And so what does that tell us? It tells us that women know how to negotiate. They are effective negotiators, or they can be if they get some training and want to be. The problem is we have this cultural conditioning, what I call it. We've all grown up in this culture where women are encouraged to be caretakers and put other needs before their own. And that gets in the way of negotiating for ourselves. And not just because, we can't, there's two sides of the coin, right? It affects what we do. So we don't always negotiate when we should, or we don't negotiate as assertively enough. But we also worry about what other people are going to think. What's the other side going to think if we step out of that stereotype and really negotiate assertively for our own needs?
Well, and you're saying men don't have those concerns by and large? They don't worry about upsetting someone or losing an offer? They're able to sort of set aside those concerns?
No, not at all. I think men have the same types of concerns. I think that it's stronger for women because of the stereotypes. Yeah. And there is also a backlash that women experience from managers and people who are hiring that men just don't experience.
Interesting. So as women, is it that we tend to ask for or accept less, or we don't, do we not even know what the possibilities are because we don't engage in the negotiations?
I think all of those things are going on. Yeah. I think that we don't see the opportunities to negotiate, and so we don't take them, and we don't ask enough. And when we do ask, we don't set goals that are high enough. We don't ask for enough.
So across at every angle, we're falling short.
Yeah, right. And it's these stories that we tell ourselves that get in the way, that we're going to be perceived as greedy or selfish, or that we're going to lose the job if we negotiate. I think that one of the biggest stories that we tell ourselves that really gets in the way is that negotiation is adversarial and that it's competitive, and that the end of that story gets to, people aren't going to like me if I engage in this adversarial activity. If I like I see people do it in the movies, right?
Right, exactly.
And it's like negotiation doesn't have to be that way, and it's not. It's not about conflict. It's really, the way my philosophy about negotiation is that it's a conversation. We're doing it every day, whether or not we call it that. Right. The problem is like when we get to a salary negotiation with a job, that's when we call it negotiation and we put all this pressure around it. But
I get a stomach ache. I get a stomach ache just thinking about salary negotiations.
And I think most people do.
Do you feel like there is a woman negotiating with a woman? Does that does that change the dialogue that, versus a woman negotiating with a man?
Not necessarily. And, these are hypotheticals. We'd have to see on a case-by-case basis. But no, I think that the same issues are at play because, whether or not you're a man or a woman, we're all affected by these cultural stereotypes.
Yeah, no, I agree. Is there something, you've worked with so many different clients, I'm sure. Is there sort of something by and large that you feel like people, that we as women are surprised by when it comes to entering into negotiations?
Yeah, I think that the most surprising thing is like being able to see that negotiation doesn't have to be adversarial or about conflict. It's really can be about creative problem solving. Even a salary negotiation can be about creative problem solving and actually building trust and strengthening the relationship we have with the other person. Most people think that it's going to be, about conflict, and that there's going to be a winner or a loser. And there are negotiations like that. But, like when you think about going to a used car sales lot, the kind of negotiation that happens there can be adversarial and all about conflict, and you can be very successful because you don't need to maintain the relationship with that person. But
you can walk away. That's right.
Exactly. But once you take it into a business setting or an employment setting, you need to maintain that relationship. So you've got to negotiate in a way that builds the relationship, and that is absolutely possible.
Even when you're negotiating salary, because I feel like some of the other perks, in terms of a job promotion or a new role, those feel more creative, but the money piece feels like a different beast to me. Is that wrong?
Well, the way I see it is that you should never just be negotiating salary. You're negotiating a compensation package. You're negotiating for your success. So you want to bring all of those things into the conversation so that you can think about creative ways to both get what you want. And money is just a part of that. And you can be creative with the money as well. For one, a lot of big companies, they might not be able to be flexible on the base salary, but, they can be really flexible on that starting bonus. So being able to think about negotiating a package rather than one issue. Because once you start negotiating just one issue alone, that price, then it does become about, it does become adversarial. It does become about a winner or a loser. But if you can broaden the scope and think about enlarging the pie so that we both get what we want, then it's, then your vision of what is possible, enlarges.
So the salary is just a piece of the puzzle then, because there's so many other, and that does feel collaborative and,
exactly.
Trying to find a solution. Okay.
Exactly.
Oh, that's interesting.
And, one of the things that I think that women forget to do is negotiate the things that are going to make you successful in your role. So what are the job duties? What's the job title? What's the kind of support and resources you would need to be able to be really effective and have a big impact?
And is it possible to negotiate for those things from the beginning?
Absolutely.
Really sort of customize the job posting?
Absolutely. I mean, part of what negotiating conversation, what part of what needs to happen is you've really got to be asking lots of questions about what it is they really need. What are not just the demands stated on the job description, but what's the real problem they're trying to solve? And can you do it? And if so, then figure out, what it is you need to be able to do that.
And do you feel like, has it been your experience that with the bigger, more complex companies, those, big Fortune 500 companies, is it harder to negotiate the job descriptions or, the roles more because you're dealing with such a big company and massive HR organizations, or does it really, is all of this negotiable, regardless of the size of the company and how complex it is?
I think it's truly negotiable regardless of the size of the company. Job descriptions often are very meaningless. They don't really mean anything. Yeah. Someone just wrote it quickly. It might even come from HR and not the manager who truly needs the role filled. So having the one-to-one conversation with the manager and figuring out, okay, here are the job duties. Here's what you really need. Here's how I could solve that. And here's how I'm going to do it. And that's those are all negotiable.
Interesting. Honestly, you've opened my eyes up to so much. I can't wait to sort of reflect back on these notes. I hear this from male and female quite a bit. And again, it's, I guess, regarding the compensation package. How do you recommend that female job seekers, or I guess even those that are seeking promotions, how do they go? What is the best way to go about determining what is fair to demand? You don't want to, you're always fearful of being outrageous in your demands.
Mm-hmm.
How do you know what's fair?
One thing that I would just shift is don't think about it as a demand. It's not a demand. It has to be a conversation. Once you make a demand, then it goes into that adversarial, competitive negotiating that feels like conflict. You've got to explore what their needs are from their perspective and what your needs are, and figure out where you can match those up. Where do they overlap? But more specifically in terms of figuring out, if you're going to put a number out there, you've got to do the research and, start with the online research, the salary.com, the payscale.com, the Glassdoor, but that's not enough, right? That data is, typically not specific enough it's not specific. It's not reliable. So it gives you a range. It gives you an idea of where to start. But then you've really got to go and talk to real people and have real conversations and figure out what's going on in your industry, in your city. What are people getting paid, and go and have those conversations. And you can do that with former managers, colleagues, people, people in your network.
And don't be afraid to just flat out ask about pay. I grew up in an era where you didn't talk about pay. It had to be very private. And I do feel like that's shifting. Are you seeing that where it's okay to blatantly ask those sorts of specifics?
It is shifting. But
that's a relief.
Money is just as uncomfortable as it was. people are uncomfortable talking about money. It's like, it's easier. Women find it easier to talk about sex than it is money. Obviously it's a stereotype, but I think that I do find that to be true in a lot of cases, but it is shifting. There's more of an expectation that we can talk about it and that we need to talk about it in order to level the playing field, in order to close the gender pay gap. And companies are starting to address this slowly. Hold on one moment.
No, you're right. And it helps bring transparency to a process that is so uncomfortable for many. But
exactly.
I agree with you. Yeah. No, I agree. And I love the idea of it not... Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. I cut you off.
Sorry. Well, I was just going to say that I don't recommend that people go and ask them, what are you making? There are better ways to have an open conversation about what people are making in the industry, right? So you don't have to be so direct and force people to say what they are making, but you can still talk about what people like you or people with those job descriptions are making.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Right. No, that makes sense. Yeah, it does. It does. And I love the idea of thinking of everything as a conversation rather than a negotiation demand, because otherwise it feels like a union bargaining situation otherwise, which is very
right. And what I try to help people see is that it can be very informal. It doesn't have to be like this, get it on the calendar, have a performance review. That's when I negotiate. No, you're having these negotiations all the time with your manager, with your colleagues, and so you're practicing these skills all the time.
Interesting. Although in some companies, I do feel like certainly the compensation piece does tend to get brought up, annually, unless you're moving to a new role. Do you feel like there's a ways for women to change how that happens?
Yeah, I think that women are much more successful when they start talking about pay, promotions and compensation 6 months before those performance reviews happen, 6 months before you expect a promotion, and start having those conversations early. And it's not just one conversation. I really want people to see that, especially women, to see that it's never just one conversation that you're going to go in and have a 5-minute conversation. We go, okay, here's your pay raise, here's your promotion.
Right.
There needs to be a lot of discussion ahead of time.
No, and it helps set the stage and sets expectations, so nobody's in the dark when the formal sort of period opens up. Okay,
right.
And the next question, I feel like I'm framing it in an adversarial way, so you can correct me. But when it comes to negotiations, is everything on the table?
Mm-hmm.
what's
People like
not
to say that, like everything is negotiable, right? And I would say no, everything is not negotiable all the time.
What's not negotiable?
I think you've got to do your work ahead of time, and that's really important work for women to do. Is before you have these negotiating conversations, is figure out what have other people negotiated in the past. What's typically negotiable at this company, and that in and of itself will give you confidence in your negotiation.
Yeah. No, and you come in informed.
Exactly. Yeah. And information is power. It really is.
So what's negotiable at one company is certainly not in another.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, like you can think about startups, in the startup culture, in technology companies, equity is often the big thing that's negotiable. But, a lot, if you're working at a private company, that might not even come up. That's not even something.
Right. It's not even available.
It's not on the table. Yeah. Or big corporations, like, we said before, they may not be able to be like in the finance industry, in consulting. There are a lot of companies that they just don't negotiate the base salary. It's kind of a lockstep thing. This is what they offer people, but starting bonuses might be very negotiable.
There's wiggle room on the other stuff.
Mm-hmm. Vacation might be negotiable. But where 401k, that's not negotiable because that is something that is set by HR. It's exactly the same for everyone. There's no way to negotiate that.
Right, right. But to your point earlier, you might be able to negotiate how many people you can hire for your team, or things that set you up for success within that company and within that role.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. So my next question is around sort of how to approach discussions throughout, for people that are looking for a job, the job seekers. There's a lot of different phases in the hiring process, a lot of hoops that people have to jump through. They get a phone screen, and then they might have a Skype interview, and then there's a panel, and then there's a one-on-one, and then sometimes more than that. Should these sorts of interview dialogue or negotiations, dialogues or discussions, should they be happening at each stage, or do you recommend you wait until you and they feel like you're the right candidate to have those discussions?
Yeah, this is a very bright line rule for me, that you should not negotiate anything about the compensation package until they have decided you're the one they want to hire. And before that, recruiters and, inside recruiters, outside recruiters, HR, they all want to ask you questions about,
they do.
What you expect, what you're making in the past. And it is it's just never to your advantage to answer those questions at that time. You have to wait until after they have decided you're the one, because you lose your negotiating leverage if you're giving that information too early before the negotiations actually start. And the negotiations don't start until they've decided they want to hire you.
Yeah. And I'm sure there's lots of different answers to this, but have you found that there are ways to largely sort of side put that part of the conversation aside, because that's what they're tasked with asking from the phone screen? What do you make? Mm-hmm. This is the range of the job, that kind of thing. How can you avert that?
I think you can. There are two ways to do it, and it's to talk about the idea that you need to both find out if you're a fit before you can talk about money.
Okay.
So let's talk about the job duties and what the job entails, and what how I can help you, and if I'm the right fit before we talk about money. Or the other way to do it is just put the question back on them. What have you budgeted for this role?
Oh, I love that. All right. And then they give you an answer.
And you can do both. You can do both of those things.
Okay.
I think that you want to be clear that you're not saying that you're accepting a number at this point. You're leaving it open for later. That's a decision to be made later. Right now, the only decision to be made is whether or not you both think this is a good fit.
Okay. No, I think that's really good. That's really good advice. But I get so many questions around, well, how do I put that conversation off till the end? And I love the examples that you gave.
Yeah. Well, it's uncomfortable, right? It's really uncomfortable.
No, absolutely.
And so part of what the work to do ahead of time is just recognize that is going to be uncomfortable, and it is going to feel like you're upsetting other people, and that is perfectly okay. Because in this scenario, you have to put your own needs first. There is nothing that you will not gain anything, and you will lose a lot if you talk about numbers too early.
Nothing to gain, everything to lose.
Exactly. If you give them a number at the beginning, especially if you tell them what you were making in your last job, then they're going to give you a little bit more, and that's it. But if they don't know what you're making, and they do have a budget, right? They've decided what they're willing to pay for this. And so if you get to the end of this process, that is a lengthy process that costs them a lot of time and money, and they've decided that you're the one, they're going to be it's much more likely that they're going to be willing to pay more at that point, right?
Right. No, they've invested a lot of time in you. That makes complete sense.
Exactly. And they're excited, and they want you to say yes, and they're going to do whatever they can in their power to get you to say yes at that point.
Right. So do you advise people to, I know I do, but to bypass applying online? Because I do feel like sometimes those are fields that you have to fill out. Yeah.
And if you're in a position where you have to fill something out, say NA or negotiable. And, you and I both know that, if you're applying to jobs online, you're typically not going to be very successable. That's not where you get jobs, right?
No, it's a poor return, right? Exactly. Exactly.
It's kind of a moot point, right?
No, yeah, I agree. All right, next question. And I feel like you sort of answered some of it. So if you don't have anything to add, just let me know. There's so many different components that you can consider when you're having a dialogue with someone as part of job search or job promotion. Are there sort of 3 components of a compensation package that you feel like are most likely negotiable, across the spectrum?
Yeah.
Private equity, startup.
I don't think it really depends on the industry, the company. And what I tell people is, decide what's important to you ahead of time. What are your priorities?
Oh, yeah.
What do you want to negotiate? And then go ask the questions behind the scenes, not during the negotiation, but, with people who work there or people or and you have, and find out if the things that you want are negotiable. Or if they, maybe not that they're negotiable, but have they negotiated and have people been successful negotiating for those things in the past?
Yeah.
Because that gives you more confidence. And not to say just because you're negotiating it for the first time that you can't be successful. It just means you might have to do a little more work to get what you want.
Right. You have to, you have to do a little bit more legwork and do a little bit more homework if you're a groundbreaker trying to negotiate
Exactly.
So I guess this last question again makes me sound like one of those people that is so worried about not upsetting people.
Well, I'm glad I'm helping change your perspective. That's fantastic.
Yes.
But no,
so
don't.
As a job seeker conducting negotiations on an offer, how do you know when you're about to push your luck?
Yeah.
And maybe it's because you've done your homework, and so then you know that that's not likely to push.
Well, when you say push your luck, what do you mean? Push your luck that they're going to say no, or what are you saying?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, exactly. I formulated that question. I realized, is it upsetting them? It's that whole mindset of wrecking the relationship, but or where they'll just pull the offer, I guess.
Right. And that's our worst fear is like, if we negotiate, are they going to rescind the offer? And it's a valid human fear that we all have. And it is so, so rare, especially if you're, the type of person who's listening to this podcast. You're going to conduct your negotiations in a professional and respectful way. And so rescinding that job offer is simply not going to happen. But you might get a no. And no just means that you're negotiating. You're still negotiating because you know what? If they didn't say no, then there would be no reason to negotiate. You just have an agreement.
That's right. Okay. You're right. And because there's multiple components to it, it's okay to get no's on some and yeses on others, ideally.
Exactly. And no just means, you know what? You haven't given me enough information yet. I'm not there yet. So we need to talk about it some more and pull it apart a little bit more, figure out what you need, figure out what I need, and, what's the alternative?
Okay. Well, Heather, those are all my questions.
Say to that, actually. There's one more point I just want to add on that about pushing your luck. I do think that in these types of job negotiations, people kind of lose their interest or their appetite for negotiating after you've gone through kind of 2 rounds of real negotiations. And if you think that like, if you're holding back something that you want to ask for and all of a sudden you throw it in at the end, that's likely not going to go over very well.
So you're saying people have lost their appetite, the people that are on the hiring side. So don't hold anything back, is what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah, that's when they start to feel like they start to question, did I make the right choice here? And so you really, part of what you're wanting to do is read the cues. You've got to have the emotional intelligence to read the nonverbal cues, the body language, the facial expressions, the tone in their voice. And not to say that you can't upset someone. It's okay for people to get upset. But you want to bring it around and reframe it to see that whatever you're asking for is going to benefit them too.
Right. Well, and zingers can, I think, could probably almost be perceived as disrespectful in terms, have all the parts of negotiation have been brought up at the beginning of the negotiation versus, okay, that's fine, and now I want this too.
Exactly. Yeah. You want to really, whatever is important to you, you want to get it out on the table at the beginning and negotiate everything together into a package. So throwing out that last Hail Mary, not a good idea.
Not a good idea. Yeah. No, that makes total sense. Well, you have opened up my eyes, making me reframe how I pose questions. And I mean, I know you work with women, but I feel like this advice is really applicable to everyone.
It is.
Job seekers, job seekers, I know they feel like they're on the spot and they've gone through so many rounds of interviews and they don't want to lose an offer that makes them more nervous than they would have been otherwise. And so they lose perspective on how to probably approach this.
Yeah. And I think it's important to think about, like, what's the cost of not negotiating? You can tell yourself that it's maybe just a $2,000 or $5,000 and it's no big deal. But when you take that base salary and you look about how it affects your career earnings, it absolutely is a big deal. It is a lot of money, and can create a lot of freedom for you and your family.
Right. And beyond the money piece, the other things that are important to you, whether it's vacation time or benefits or flexible schedules, all of those things can impact your life. And so if they're important.
Exactly.
No, that makes so much sense.
You're right.
Well, Heather,
the big picture.
Thank you so much. You have opened my eyes. I can't. Now tell us if someone wants to learn more about you or take advantage of your services. This is on the bio that I'll put on my podcast page, but tell us the best way to learn from you.
Yeah, you can watch my free masterclass, and that's available on my website. If you just go to womenwhoask.com, check out my free masterclass, and you'll get a better sense of how I approach negotiations, talking about some of the things we talked about today and some others as well.
Okay. All right. And the website is womenwhoask.com. And if someone wants to reach out to you with any questions, you suggest that they reach you on email, through LinkedIn. What's the best way?
Email is great. Heather@womenwhoask.com.
Excellent. And that's also in the bio on the podcast page. Well, Heather, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I'm so looking forward to this call, and you did not disappoint. I've walked away with so much food for thought.
Oh, well, I had so much fun. Thank you for having me.
You've been listening to Resume Storyteller with Virginia Franco. To learn more about storytelling strategies to catch the eye of today's SCIM online readers, hiring and decision makers, go to www.virginiafrancoresumes.com.